Herman, thank you for taking time to be on the Bitcoin Source. Can we start things off by you introducing yourself to the audience?
Yeah, sure thing, man. My name is Hermann. I run a project known as BitcoinEkasi. It's it's a Bitcoin-based community and educational effort. And yeah, I love Bitcoin.
Yeah, most definitely. I love Bitcoin as well. And the first question I usually ask people on the Bitcoin Source is one that I always find profound and interesting, which is what were some of the most important sources of the knowledge that you've gained to become a better Bitcoiner, whether it be books, courses, or even people that might have inspired you? So could you kind of explain to the audience some of those things that made you as good about Bitcoin as you are today?
Okay, cool. I was introduced to Bitcoin via Bitcoin Magazine, and Bitcoin Magazine has always been my primary source of information. I think some of the early articles that I read in there definitely formed my understanding of Bitcoin. And it's, I know in Bitcoin they say, verify, don't trust, but because it was my first introduction to Bitcoin, I still have a special place for that publication. So yeah, and there's so many great people that write for that magazine. I mean, they've got some really, really great authors. So yeah, Bitcoin Magazine, and I think a lot of interesting. I mean, there are so many good podcasts. It's just there's a hell of a lot of good podcasts. I can't even begin to mention all of them. But I think recently what I've enjoyed a lot is the sort of macro stuff from Lynn Alden. It gives me a really good sort of overview of where Bitcoin fits into the bigger picture, because she comes at it, like, I like the fact that she's an engineer by training, and so she comes at it from like a nuts and bolts perspective, so it fits Bitcoin into the bigger picture very well, I think.
Yeah, most definitely. I'd agree with that as well. And it's just interesting that, you living in Africa and being kind of further away from the spigot in a sense of like where a lot of the energy and the news and the media is coming from as far as Bitcoin is concerned. It's always interesting to hear like how impactful a publication like Bitcoin Magazine has been for people across the world to really learn about Bitcoin. So that's super cool and interesting to hear for sure.
Yeah, 100%, man.
Yeah. So what I really want to get into, which is super interesting to me, is that, the world may not know, but you're a world-renowned surfer in your community, and you kind of use surfing to help the people of the locals in the area. And, my question to you is how important is it for you to create a circular Bitcoin economy in Mossel Bay, South Africa?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the most exciting thing I've ever done. Definitely. And I think it's really important to build these types of projects to demonstrate what we are trying to do, because as I understand it anyway, as Bitcoiners, what we're trying to do is we're trying to get Bitcoin to be a real world medium of exchange, store of value, a real world currency, and we're building it up towards that. And so having these little, sort of pocket projects where circular economies start happening, I think it's really important, because it demonstrates what we want to have happen on a much bigger scale one day. The sooner the better. And I think it's one of the many legs that the world of Bitcoin stands on and grows on. Obviously, there are many other things that are equally important, if not more important, like development of the protocol. But we all contribute what we can, and this is what I can contribute. I can't code. I'm not a developer. I can write a little bit, but what I can do is I can run this project, which we have. We've basically just sort of converted an pre-existing project into this, what will hopefully become a circular Bitcoin economy, along the lines of Bitcoin Beach. And because I've been running this project for years and I understand Bitcoin okay. I've been in it for long enough to, to know the difference between a Bitcoin and a shitcoin. and so this is what I can contribute, and I think for me personally, it's really important because this is the most constructive thing that I can contribute towards Bitcoin. It's definitely not the most important thing in the world of Bitcoin, but for me, it's the most important thing because this is by far the best contribution I can make, and hopefully it helps to get Bitcoin to where we all want to see
Yeah,
it.
most definitely. And I want to tell you first that like you really inspire me. Like I've read your story, I've written about your story on, Bitcoin publications, and you're wearing so many different hats. You have Surfer Kids, you have UnravelSurf, you have BitcoinEkasi, and it's like all of these different things that you're doing, you're still kind of following your passion, which is surfing and being a coach to teach other people how to surf, especially in communities in South Africa where there's not a lot of jobs, there's not a lot of stimulation where people have, trades or things that they're actually good at. And you're kind of utilizing the environment and the natural habitat of being so close to the ocean and kind of helping students that are impoverished in those areas to learn how to surf. So my next question to you is, how has surfing changed your life and the lives of your students?
For me personally, surfing surfing was a sort of an escape for me. So I grew up like everyone else in a world that wasn't always aligned, well, almost very rarely aligned with what I wanted, which was, from as far back as I can remember, I wanted freedom. I wanted to do what I wanted to do, not like in some weird selfish way, but like as a kid, I wanted to go on adventures. I didn't want to sit in a classroom and repeat, boring stuff. I wanted to go out and explore and obviously, I mean, it's not to say that learning is not important, but the point I'm trying to make is that surfing for me was this way to live out this adventurous spirit that I was born with. And it still is that, and for me, it's very different from what it is for the kids. Although maybe it's the same. I mean, they come. I mean, the kids that we work with in the Surfer Kids, the non-profit based in the township, they come from horrific circumstances. It's hard to describe how difficult the circumstances where they live. Houses that are built from scrap material that people pick up off the side of the road, no running water. The house blows apart when there's wind. When it rains, everything is soaking wet. So, there is no such thing as a toilet inside the house. It's hectic. And so I think for them, maybe surfing is also a kind of an escape, but it's a different kind of escape. It's not the kind of escape that I had as a child. Obviously, I grew up in very different circumstances. My parents could afford a proper house, etc. So, but I think for the kids, for me, it was an escape to find this spirit of adventure I was born with. For the kids, maybe it's an escape to a situation where there's hope. They can go into the ocean, and when they're in the ocean, everybody else that's there with them is sort of a level playing field, and you navigate your environment according to your skill. If you have the skill to surf and to navigate the waves, then you can navigate it. And if you don't have the skill, then you've got to learn to have that skill. And that's not how the world works. I mean, the world often doesn't care about your skill. It cares about your connections and your, So the ocean, I guess, is a fair place, and it's a place that treats you fairly. Whereas the world is not a fair place. It doesn't treat people fairly. It treats people according to, according to who they know, not what you know. So I guess maybe, but I mean, I'm not speaking on behalf of the kids, but based on what I can see, I think maybe that's something that they find in surfing, and it also gives them an identity. It gives them something constructive to hold on to. The same way kids would find an identity in kids from these circumstances sometimes find identities in less constructive ways, like gangsterism and whatever. But surfing also can give an identity. It's this thing that you become good at, and it's a difficult thing to be good at. So if you're good at it, it's very difficult for somebody else to just come along and take that away, because you're better at this thing than they are. So maybe that's what they find in it, I guess.
Yeah, most definitely. And like, I've read your story. I've looked at, the nonprofit and what you're doing. And to give the audience a little bit more of a background, you're not only teaching these kids to surf, but you're also teaching them about finance and a circular economy using Bitcoin and the Lightning Network, especially in the local shops in the area where people have a difficult time saving their money or keeping the rand from being, inflated and debased. And, I've read some of your stuff for your nonprofit where you said that it only requires about 30 US dollars to fund, a multitude of students, which is around 500 Rand or so. It might have changed because the price fluctuates so much. But I kind of want the audience to know and be aware of your nonprofit and the great things that you're doing in South Africa for the kids and for the youth in the area while teaching about Bitcoin. And my last question for you is, um, you know, will you create a type of Bitcoin surplus, for funding for the surfer kids, for BitcoinEkasi and UnravelSurf, kind of like a vault of Satoshi, so that later down the road, when you're older or you're retired, you'll still have Bitcoin kind of funding some of these nonprofit organizations?
What BitcoinEkasi has done is basically given the surfer kids a new and better way of funding itself. Because I mean, you probably know this, and most people who've run a business or an organization would know that the most expensive part is often salaries. So the people who run the organization, they cost more than anything else, paying their salaries, and it makes sense. I mean, the human resources is the most important part of an organization. The building is going to be there, and the building is going to behave the same way, regardless. But people need to be incentivized to do good work, and so if you pay people a proper salary, they will do better work. So, and that's what BitcoinEkasi has done. BitcoinEkasi has taken on the salaries of the surfer kids. So the surfer kids benefit greatly from the Bitcoin project, because the donations that BitcoinEkasi receives in Bitcoin covers the salaries of the coaches who run the surfer kids program, and it gives the surfer kids access to a whole world of donations, because it's running on the Bitcoin rails. So people can send a donation from anywhere in the world. They can send it over the Lightning Network, so it means they can send really small donations, and I'd rather receive 100 small donations than one big donation, because that also builds community. And so the Surfer Kids has benefited, the Surfer Kids nonprofit has benefited greatly from this, because, we now have more coaches who run the program for the kids. And we can afford to pay better salaries for those coaches, because we have access to a big world out there of people using Bitcoin and sending Bitcoin donations over the Lightning Network. Before it was very difficult to convince people to send donations from overseas, because, you'd lose 5% of your donation goes to fucking PayPal or whatever, Now you send Bitcoin to BitcoinEkasi, it pays for a salary of one of the coaches. That almost 100% of what you've sent comes to the organization. Nothing is lost to a merchant in the middle, because we're all using the same money, which is fantastic. I wish the world can understand the significance of this, the fact that we can sit on opposite sides of the planet, but we're using the same money. And because we're using the same money, it just makes things flow easier and work better. So the Surfer Kids has benefited a lot from this. And we're encouraging, Bitcoin naturally encourages this mentality of saving for the future. So yes, hopefully we can carry that mentality into the way the organization is run. If it was up to me, of course we would do that, but working with the coaches, this is a process of education. They're very new to Bitcoin. The coaches have only been involved in Bitcoin since we started BitcoinEkasi, which is a year ago, just over a year. So the saving mentality is still something that we are educating on. But if we do it right, then Bitcoin could fund this project for years to come, because it's that long-term mentality has benefited. Most people who've had a long-term perspective, 5 to 10 years, have benefited greatly from adopting Bitcoin as their long-term savings. And I have no doubt that if the organization does that, it will also benefit greatly in the same way. As for our business, UnravelSurf, we started accepting Bitcoin payments from clients in 2015. So I've been using Bitcoin in my business to run surf trips for overseas clients since way back then. And I I wish I didn't have to use that Bitcoin to run the surf trip, because obviously 2015 was a great year to buy Bitcoin. But we've also benefited from adopting Bitcoin so early. It made business easier. It made receiving payments from clients from overseas easier. And also because we've been using it for a while, I think the biggest benefit has been to come to understand the long-term perspective, because that itself takes time. My business has benefited greatly from coming to understand the long-term perspective. Like, you don't come into Bitcoin and then 2 months later you understand, oh, okay, this is a long-term thing. Most people come into Bitcoin and they think, okay, I've got to make money now, and then they go down the shitcoin rabbit hole and then they come back to Bitcoin eventually. So yeah, I guess that answers the question.
Yeah, my last thoughts on this is, this is what Bitcoin's really about. At least for me, it is. I'm really focused on, Bitcoin being a tool to kind of free people from poverty, from, being in disenfranchised situations or in disenfranchised communities. And when I heard your story and read about, your surfing ability and how you've helped a lot of people in your community get better about feeling good about themselves and feeling good about actually ownership and sovereignty and having a proof of work for something, I just felt super compelled to make sure I had a Bitcoin conversation with you. So, Herman, last thoughts and questions for you is, give the audience your social media handle and any other future endeavors you want people to know about.
Cool, man. Social media, I think the most important thing to follow there is the BitcoinEkasi project. It's at BitcoinEkasi. Ekasi is spelled Ekasi. And then the Surfer Kids is also on Twitter. It's also an important one to follow, I think, because the Surfer Kids is ultimately the platform that we are using for the BitcoinEkasi project. The Surfer Kids is at the_surfer_kids. So I think, those are the two most important ones to follow. And it's exciting. It's exciting times. I really look forward to the future and what it holds. And I think the most important thing that we are busy with right now, and which is also going to be really important in the near future, is the education center that we opened, where we have we've opened this center in the community, where the coaches live, where the kids come from. We've been recruiting children from this township community for many years, and the coaches that work for us have lived there all their lives. And the businesses that we've been onboarding to accept Bitcoin are also in that community. So our whole effort is focused on that community. But we've never had a center in that community. The center we've used for the past several years has been down at the beach, because that's where we do the surfing with the kids. But now that we've got this Bitcoin project, it was really important for us that we opened a center in the community to show that they can trust us, that there's a physical location. If one of the shop owners has a problem with their wallet, they can come to the building where there's a coach who can help them, understand what needs to be done, help them back up their wallet, help them restore their wallet, help them cash out if they have to, help them not to fall down the shitcoin rabbit hole, help them to get a better understanding of Bitcoin. And then obviously it's got an educational component for the children as well. We will run daily classes there for kids that are focused on basic mathematics, literacy, and then Bitcoin on top of that. And I think that's the most important thing going forward, because, Bitcoin to me, I think Bitcoin adoption means nothing without education. Bitcoin has to be a choice. Like people have to choose to use Bitcoin. It's not going to work if it's forced down on people. It's a freedom technology. So if people adopt Bitcoin, it has to be a choice. And a choice, a free choice, something that's truly a free choice has to be an informed decision. Like if I don't know what I'm doing, then I'm not making a free choice. But if I'm educated and if I understand what I'm doing, then that's choosing, for myself. That's choosing, with making an informed decision is a prerequisite for yeah, it's hard to explain, but I think you understand what I'm saying. So education is so important, because without education, there is no freedom of choice. Without education, we're just told what to do, and we do what we do because we're told what to do. Without education, but with education, we can make informed decisions. So I think going forward, this education center is definitely, for me, the most important aspect of this project. Onboarding shops and getting Bitcoin to circulate in the economy. Obviously, that's the ultimate goal of the project. Like ultimately, BitcoinEkasi wants to build a circular Bitcoin economy in this township. But how do we get there? And I think we get there primarily through education. Education is a critical component of that journey to get to that goal.
100%. And, Herman, I'm really grateful and honored to be able to interview you and to really allow the world to hear your story, because I think that is super pertinent and important. And I want everybody to, check out the Surfer Kids, UnravelSurf, BitcoinEkasi. All these nonprofit organizations are super helpful. Check them out, donate if you can, and just allow this Bitcoin ecosystem to continue to flourish. So once again, Herman, thank you for taking time to be on the Bitcoin Source. Have a good one.
Awesome. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.